All right, good evening, everybody. I am Jorge Rodriguez. I'm one of your session moderators today. I would like to welcome you to the 9th Annual Building Bridges Dual Credit Conference. Today's pre-conference workshop is titled Learning Outcomes 101 with Rebekah Bell as your presenter. We kindly ask you that you keep your mics muted to preserve the bandwidth. Please keep in mind that this session will be recorded. Also, feel free to post your questions in the chat. We will collect them, and then our presenter will address the questions at the end of the session. For EPCC Faculty Development Credit, we will post a sign-in sheet in the chat. You will sign in with your EPCC login credentials. The full attendees list will be downloadable from Teams for anyone without EPCC login credentials. We will also post the session evaluation in the chat towards the end of the workshop. And now I will turn it over to our presenter, Rebekah Bell. Rebekah, if you are ready.
Absolutely. Do you want me to mute my camera too, or does it matter?
No, you're good. You can leave
He's
it on.
shrugging. He's like, it's fine. This is what I look like. It's all good. It's 5 o'clock on a Thursday. I'm leaving my camera on. This is just like pride in making it this far into the day. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to my session, Learning Outcomes 101. I feel like Southwest Airlines. We know you have a lot of options when it comes to your conference selection, so thank you for flying with us. I'm gonna really try and make sure that tonight is kind of upbeat and hype so that we can push through, and eventually we will all 2 for 20 at Applebee's later on. So this is Learning Outcomes 101, and I'm Rebekah Bell, the Director of Student Learning Outcomes. I don't know, it might just be me, it might not, I don't know. But one thing that I've learned during virtual conferences is that I have a tendency to walk out of them, and when I'm telling people, hey, I saw this session, I can never remember anything about the presenter except that they had a super soothing voice. So in my online presentations, I've started doing a little bit about me so that later on, when you're like, I saw this super great presentation, you can be like, and it was from that woman who's married to a pirate. So I am Rebekah Bell. I love the beach, which is very important because my husband is a pirate, as you can see in his picture right there. How he became a pirate, that's a bit of a mystery. It happened over COVID, and you know, during COVID, things happened. I do have 2 children. They're both in high school, Go Rams and Harmony Science Academy. They are both pictured right there on your screen. My daughter is below, and my son, honestly, that is about the only angle that anyone sees my son in anymore, is over there on your right. So I have a great passion for teenagers right now with my Matu. I cheer for SISD Fine Arts with my daughter, and quite frankly, my son is just kind of into history and everything that goes with it. For many years, pretty much my whole career, I was faculty here at EPCC in the speech communication discipline. During that time, I did have the honor to teach in our dual credit and early college high school populations. Specifically, I've taught for Cotton Valley Early College High School and the Trans Mountain Early College High School. But for 2 summers, I also worked with Socorro Independent School District on their summer academy. So that was fun. Starting in about 2015 is when I started working on learning outcomes assessment in the core curriculum, general ed specifically. In 2020, I started working with our program assessments, which is our student learning outcomes, and I became director in 2021. So when you hear me speak, know the context from which I come. I'm a parent of children who are in high school. I've taught dual credit early college high school, and I've been working in assessment for a long time. So I wear a lot of hats. I have decided it's very important to start with a distinction. And so I want to lead with this. This is kind of my proclamation at the beginning, because sometimes whenever I'm talking about learning outcomes with dual credit and other populations, there's this kind of anxiety that I feel. I've had people ask me directly, well, are we going to have the outcome data used somehow to evaluate us? So let me start by really putting something in a particular frame, and that is learning outcome assessments here at EPCC are not used to rank, score, hire, fire, rate, or evaluate schools, faculty, or students. What we are using them for is to hopefully improve the learning experiences for students. That's what we're trying to do. And so it's super important that you participate in this and that you give us really accurate data, because that's the mission, heart, and soul of what we're doing. Scores, they are what they are. They're not going to be used to rank anybody. So what is the outcomes for today? What am I going to be talking about? Well, first of all, I want to make sure that as you're encountering different types of learning outcome assessments at EPCC, that you understand what they are, because we do have a couple, and so it's possible you'll be asked to do one or both of them. I want you to know the assessment cycle rhythm and why at different points in the cycle you may be asked for really different types of documents. I want you to always know who you can ask for help and support. And so we're going to talk about key personnel offices and ways to get a hold of them. And then very, very important, I want you to understand for us, how does the outcome data get analyzed and what are we ultimately trying to do with it so that you really understand kind of our heart and soul, our ethos when we engage in this process. So what is a learning outcome? My guess is y'all already know this, but let me go ahead and just give you the definition because I always like to start there and put everybody on the same foundation as we launch out. A learning outcome is very simple. It is a simple and measurable statement that indicates what a student should know, be able to do, or even what we want them to value at the end of a particular course of study. Now, what those look like can be a little different. I will transition to that in a little minute. So I also wanted to make sure I hit this slide, which is talking to you about how the work fits in with the EPCC mission and strategic plan. So the EPCC mission statement is to ensure affordable, high quality education and career pathways from start to finish. And of course, learning outcome assessment is in direct support of making sure that we're providing quality education, but specifically it supports the strategic plan goal number 1 of providing high quality education to meet students' diverse needs, and outcome 2 to prepare students with marketable skills. So what we're doing here directly aligns to the mission and purpose and the strategic goals of the college. Now, looping back to my transition a moment ago, so what do learning outcomes assessments look like? Well, generally there are 2. And I want to point out that there are 2 because it's quite likely that you will run into both. And at the time you encounter them, they may seem kind of to overlap or seem really different. So I have a lot of historians here. Let me use history as the example. Maybe you're history faculty and you're contacted, hey, we're doing outcomes assessment. We have 4 learning outcomes for you. We're using this particular project. You're going to run these rubrics off of that, turn in your data. And you're like, I got this. So you go, you do all the things, you teach as you brilliantly ordinarily would, you pick up the student work, you assess it, you send your data back in, you are done. Then you turn around, you've got a second email and they're like, hey, we need learning outcomes data. We're assessing 2 learning outcomes, looking at primary and secondary sources. We need you to make sure you teach the content, that you go pick up the data, go. And you're thinking to yourself, am I crazy or did I not just do that? Like, didn't I give you that data already? Did I do something wrong? No, you are just encountering the fact that we have 2 major types of learning assessments that you will probably encounter. One of them is our general education core curriculum assessments. You will hear those referred kind of within EPCC as either CLOs or general education outcomes. These are outcomes that are attached to those early courses students are taking as they're pursuing their associate's degree, those 15 gen ed hours or the 42 core curriculum hours, where they're just picking up broad-based transferable skills, things like the ability to communicate, the ability to do computations, for instance, mathematics, since Lauren is here, critical thinking. These are transferable skills that are going to be used everywhere a student goes, out there in their life, throughout their education. And so when we assess the gen ed core, there are particular outcomes that we need to happen or need to make sure are happening across all of those courses. Those outcomes are standardized. In Texas, we have alignment across all our core curriculums. And here at EPCC, we've aligned all the measures and standards. And so the way you measure, the way the benchmark we're trying to hit, everybody's going after the same thing. So that's going to take on a particular lean. It's going to look a particular way. You will probably get notice that you need to assess these sorts of outcomes. But you may also be contacted about student learning outcomes or program outcomes, SLOs. These are a little bit different. These reflect the essential learning for students who are majors in a particular program. These are the courses you take beyond the core curriculum, where we are pursuing degrees in nursing, dance, art, etc. And these are created and controlled by the program, whether they have a degree or certificate or not. And the discipline will decide how to measure, what the standard is, what the calendar is. So when you get that second email, for instance, from history, asking for the primary and secondary sources, what you were seeing was their student learning outcomes. So when you hear different vernacular, different terminology, it is not that anything is going wrong. It's that we've got two different major threads inside of our outcomes assessment. So which ones will you be involved with if you're working with dual credit, early college, high school, or P-TECH? Gen Ed, most likely. In fact, still a lot of our dual credit is entirely Gen Ed facing. So my guess, I put money on you'll see these. These are, again, the state-oriented and aligned outcomes with all the standardized measures. We measure in every single course in the Gen Ed core. So that means if you teach a Gen Ed core course, you're gonna see them 100% for sure. But the SLOs, maybe, maybe not. So if you're in a program or in a discipline that has no degree map, but they have SLOs, I'm looking at you: history, government, sociology, economics, EDUC 1300, educational psychology. Those particular disciplines will also assess their program assessments in their Gen Ed courses. And as a result, you might run into them, especially if you're teaching those sorts of courses. But if you're in a discipline that has a program map, this is where we're talking about automotive or one of the others that has a map, then usually their program assessments are happening at the end of the associate's degree, somewhere right before that student is graduating. And as a result, we're either looking at really advanced kind of capstone coursework, or we're looking at exit certification exams. My guess is you won't run into these, but you might, particularly if you're in a P-TECH or an early college, high school, depending on how the program is set up. Now, there is this other kind of hybrid monster that we are unleashing, and that is we are working on making sure we advance our SLO assessments in our multidisciplinary programs. Multidisciplinary programs are programs that have majors, but they're run by more than one discipline. There are 4 of these at EPCC. If you have a student in a class that is a major in a multidisciplinary program, you might get a call from me or one of the many disciplines inside of that program asking you to pick up data on a particular student. If you get contacted, it's going to look totally different. They're not going to say for the whole class do XYZ. They're going to ask you for particular information on the 1 or 2 students who happen to be in your course. Now, if you get that email, and a lot of you are hearing from me now about the Multidisciplinary Associates of Arts, we're sampling and assessing those SLOs right now. Don't worry about the other students. Just give us the information on the ones that we've identified. And just know if you don't hear anything, you probably don't have the majors, and just follow the directions and you'll be fine. So how is this going to happen? We have what are called assessment cycles. Assessment cycles run 3 years. They follow the academic year from August through July. And so the current cycle that we're in started in August 2021, and it's going to end in July of 2024, 3 years. In those 3 years, there are 3 phases. They're intended to correspond with each of the years. So in year 1, the assessment plan and information is selected by the discipline. We call this planning and preparation. In year 2, the discipline is working on data collection. So this one is called data collection and analysis. Year 3, the discipline is making sure they look at that data, they get together, they collaborate on ways to respond and improve the program or improve the course for student learning. This one is called reporting and improving. Depending on what year you're in, You may be asked in your learning outcomes assessment to turn in really different types of documents. So for instance, a lot of disciplines are collecting data now and in the spring. So that means that you're more than likely going to be contacted to pick up data, but you may hear back from people again next year. This time asking you for, hey, can you give us information on an implementation? Or, hey, can you help us make sure this is happening in your class? And can you turn in information that helps us understand how to analyze this data and really figure out how to respond well? And if you're asked for that other information next year, please know it doesn't mean that anything went wrong this year. It means that now the discipline is in the next phase of that assessment rhythm or process. So what are you likely going to have to provide if you are teaching a dual credit early college high school class? Well, data, definitely the one. If you've been working with assessment for any length of time, you're probably like, oh my gosh, I got this. I am crushing it. And you are. But there are some new items that will likely be asked of you. One, we are going to ask that disciplines also provide, for me in my office, evidence that the plan for improvement was implemented. What does that mean? Well, your plan for improvement depends on what the discipline decided to do. If the discipline was like, hey, we want to improve student learning by making sure that everybody gets trained, then the evidence that you may be asked to provide is that you completed the training. This might be as simple as signing in when you attend the training with your discipline. If the evidence is, hey, we want to make sure that every student is provided a certain experience or a certain handout or given a certain module online, you may be asked to provide evidence, screenshots, something along those lines, saying, yes, I handed it in, or sometimes even memos saying, hey, it was enacted on this date. When you are asked that, please know that your discipline point of contact is not trying to micromanage you. They are not trying to spy on you. I have asked them to provide that because that's part of what we need to report. Same thing with item number 3. We are now also asking that people provide sample student work. This is not something that's intended to like run around and be used to evaluate you or double check how you're teaching in any way. It is just the case that when we went through our reporting period this last year, that one of the things we were asked for was to provide, particularly for the core curriculum, the core assessment, gen ed assessment, samples and examples of student work that we use to assess the core. So if you are teaching a dual credit class, early college class, PTEC, etc., it's quite possible that your discipline is going to ask from you, hey, would you give us copies of the student work that you're evaluating? Again, not them, it's me. And having to pick those up and keep track of them. We'll make sure that they're turned into an anonymous document so that no one is aware of names or anything, and we're just going to warehouse them. And if anyone ever asks to see anything like that again, we will have it ready for them. So who, what, when, where, and how can you reach out to people and get help if you need it? Well, the first and really important person that you can always reach out to is your district-wide coordinator. Your district-wide coordinator, for those of you who may not be aware, is the person who represents and speaks for your discipline in curriculum matters and many operational matters. Your EPCC coordinator probably knows who this person is. And so if you don't know, ask that person, whoever checks your syllabus, and they will definitely know who the district-wide is. The district-wide will specifically know number 2, which is the discipline assessment point of contact. Your discipline assessment point of contact are faculty that have been selected by the discipline, or in some cases, the district-wide coordinator, to work the learning assessments for the discipline itself. I, from my office, always ask every discipline to give me 2 people. So that way we always have kind of the brain and then the backup brain if we can't reach this person. So there should always be 2. Your discipline, if they have both SLO assessments as well as Gen Ed Core, may have 2 separate sets of people or even entire teams if you're in larger disciplines like math or biology, geology, history, etc. These human beings are incredibly cool. they engage in a lot of additional training so that they are able to really understand what the assessment process should look like. And they're tasked primarily with making sure that the assessment documents are created, that they meet all of our requirements procedurally, state law, as well as any kind of accreditation requirements. And they pretty much run the assessment for the district. So when you talk to this person, understand who you're talking to. It's not just a regular faculty member anymore. You're talking to a superhero. These human beings do a lot, they know a lot, and I guarantee you they can answer any question that you ask. If for some reason, however, you have questions and you're not sure who to direct them to or how to get a hold of one of the people above, you can always call me, because I literally love questions and I really enjoy talking about this stuff. So if you'll reach out to me, I'm the Director of Student Learning Outcomes and I'm the institutional point of contact for all learning outcomes assessment. I put my contact information on the screen there, so feel free to go ahead and do a screen capture, take a picture, write it down, whatever it is your jam is. I'm also going to put that back up at the end if you need to get a hold of me and you need it a second time. I don't know everything, but I know a lot and I like to help. So you can always reach out to me. But more importantly, I can figure out who knows. And so if you have a question and you're like, I've run this past the district-wide coordinator, I've run this past the point of contact, the question remains, shoot it my direction. If I can't answer it, I guarantee you, I will find someone who can. All right, so here's the part that I get super excited about. How will all of this data that you collect be used? So I want to loop back to something that I touched on at the beginning. The way that learning outcome assessment is used in higher ed kind of generally, but especially here at EPCC, is probably a little bit different than some of the other assessments that we'll see happen. So for instance, I know there's some assessments that occur in various high school levels that the data is very much linked to instructors and they're very much linked to schools. And those are used to generate all kinds of things from like scores to grades to whatever. That's not what we're doing. When we go to use data, depending on whether it's Gen Ed Core or SLOs, what we are looking to accomplish with the outcomes assessment is this. So if we're talking about Gen Ed or core outcomes, we do want to make sure that we're sharing assessment results and being really transparent about what we're learning, because we want students to know what the outcomes are and we want everyone to have an awareness of what the learning goals are that we're setting for ourselves and our students, so that students are able to identify what are the things I'm learning and how is that being transferred as I move from the Gen Ed to the program. Use one. Two, we want our disciplines, very importantly, to be able to improve their courses. So disciplines will take that assessment data and not just look at one class. They look at all of the classes in the big picture and ask, so what do we need to do to make XYZ better in this course across the entire district? Doesn't matter who the student is in there. Dual credit, early college, high school, P-Tech, traditional online modality, whatever it is, competency-based education. We want to make sure that we do something to all of these different populations and different modalities to improve the course. That way, we can hopefully both improve immediate as well as long-term student success. Very importantly, it is used institutionally at EPCC by an organization called the Curriculum Committee. The EPCC Curriculum Committee then takes all of this data collected in all of these courses and looks at it in aggregate and creates a picture of every course in the core together for each outcome. And then that committee makes a decision about how do we improve learning overall institutionally. So let me use as an example one of the initiatives we've been working on for a while. Back in 2016 to 2018, we discovered doing this process that our students needed more support in terms of learning computational math. And so we've spent several years now trying to improve student transfer of math skills to other courses, particularly their social science courses and their science courses, so that students have an awareness of, hey, I learned this in my math class, but I'm not just going to need it in my math class. I'm going to need it in my economics class too, so that when they get to the economics class, there's more practice reinforcement, and they're going to be able to do the mathematics really well. So when they get to the program, whatever the program may be, they have the practiced application of the skill to be really successful while they pursue their completed associate's degree. All of that is like the heart and soul, like that is the it for student learning or for gen ed outcomes or outcomes in general. But there's this other piece that I need to mention, and that is we do use it for accreditation purposes, but I listed that last. Although it sometimes gets mentioned first. People are going to tell you, oh, we got to do this because we got to report to here and there and everywhere. And that's true. We are required to make sure we're demonstrating transparency in how students are learning in the gen ed core. And so we do have to provide data showing, hey, this is what we learned, this is what we analyzed, and here's how we're seeking improvement. But that's just a report. That's just when we write it down. The work is everything you see above, and you turning in really valid data is not only helping students and disciplines, it's helping the entire college to make sure that we're improving learning in those early days where the student is launching out into their degree. In your second column, you'll see the discussion for program outcomes or SLOs. How do we use the assessment data there? Well, again, same thing. We want students to have an awareness of what the outcomes are and how that learning is happening, because we want them to eventually be able to articulate to someone as they're getting a job, not just, hey, I took a class and blah, 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 or hey, I have a degree and blah, 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 but here's what I know and here's what I can do for you, because that operationalized language really helps students when they're marketing themselves as they step out into their career. It is also utilized by faculty to make sure we're improving the student experiences and that we're improving student success wherever we're locating those dynamics within programs. It is used by community groups such as advisory, professional communities, etc., as we share that data outward, and we're asking them to help consult our disciplines about, well, what do we need to be doing here to make sure that the curriculum is up to date and ready to go. It is used again by the discipline to be able to speak to funding sources, grants, the college, to say, hey, we're trying to make sure that we get everything that we need to be really successful. And so we need to hire somebody, we need to buy something, we need to get access to a particular type of software or equipment. It can also then be used to recruit students as the discipline learns to be able to say, hey, we can validate that we teach you to do X, Y, Z incredibly well. And then last, by accreditation teams for reporting. But again, last for a reason, because essentially the accreditation report is where we just write down all the miraculous things that happened above. And we talk about how that analysis is being used to pursue all of the work that we do in higher ed. Please, please note what's not here. We are not using this to evaluate individual faculty, individual students, individual classes, what you had for lunch, whether or not you like dogs. None of that matters to us. What we want to do is teach students how to articulate what they're learning, teach disciplines how to be able to improve the work for students, and empower the college to keep providing really high quality education pathways from start to finish. That is the learning outcomes work. So let me go ahead and reiterate. Not being used to evaluate whether or not you're a good teacher, whether or not you've got good students, or whether or not your school or program is great. And I have had faculty tell me, even as early as this week, no way. Because here's the thing, learning outcomes reporting, whether we're talking about student learning outcomes or gen ed core, when we turn it in, we don't actually, we report the entire picture. That's important, it's transparent, but that's not the piece that we're really evaluated on. When we're being evaluated, what we need to be able to demonstrate is we've identified outcomes and then really importantly, collected data and analyzed it, and then did something with that data analysis, because we're using that to try and help students pursue learning. So we have to show that we did this work to seek improvement. So particular scores, whether good or bad, are just kind of like in the ether. They're kind of in the background. It's like the jazz music that plays. But what we really turn in, where people, when they look at us, are like, okay, how'd you do? Is when we are trying to demonstrate, hey, we sought improvement. So accurate data really matters. We really need you to be honest in your evaluations anytime you're asked to do, whether it's core assessment or SLOs, to give us your best read as a content expert on what this stuff means. Because if we have good data, then we can do a good job at responding to it. And that is where the rubber meets the road. So I put this on a dark slide because I have had people ask me to mention, what happens if I don't turn the things in? Well, if you don't turn the things in, it's kind of like, have you seen It's a Wonderful Life? Where every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. If you don't turn in your assessment data, somewhere an assessment point of contact soul actually dies a little. So again, assessment points of contact are amazing human beings. They are faculty who are content experts. They understand how to teach really well. That's why we chose them for this task, but they have an amazingly large job. Their job is to make sure that the discipline is in compliance with college procedures, state law, and accreditation, and that's a lot. It requires a lot of training to get up to speed on what all of those requirements are. It takes ongoing training to make sure that you're still moving with the college at whatever pace that we're moving in terms of making sure that we have initiatives up and going. That takes literally hours. And then they spend months in meetings with me, with the discipline, with other stakeholders, laying out assessment plans and systems to make sure that everything works. Because if they're not able to do this well, then they know bad things. So when you hear from your assessment point of contact, who will be contacting you, probably using your EPCC email address, please have mercy on this human being. Even if you're thinking to yourself, this human being needs to switch to decaf. You need to know that they are simply tasked with this big job. And I really am asking you to make sure that when they contact you, answer them quickly, and whatever they ask for, give it to them in the timeframe, manner, and method requested. Because probably whatever the timeframe, manner, and method requested is linked to something that was set up for a reason. And it's incredibly helpful when we have everything happen within the box, because then everybody is able to get everything done in a timely manner. So that was a lot. Let me go ahead and hit my review. So today I have covered how to understand and differentiate between the major types of learning assessments at EPCC, how to articulate cycles of assessment and the phases that are going to occur within each cycle, how to send out a flare, call the bat phone, and reach out if you need help, and really how to understand how data is being analyzed and being used when we do learning outcomes here at EPCC. So as promised, there are ways to get a hold of me, and I literally get no more joy out of life than answering questions about this. You can ask probably anybody on this call, because I'm seeing a lot of people I know, and be like, does she really want to talk about it? Yes, more than you know. And probably you'll be stuck on the phone with me as I share my anecdotes. So please send anything that you have questions about my direction. I would love to make sure we answer those for you. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Have a beautiful evening. And if you have questions, I would love to answer those.
We do have one question in the chat.
Oh, go for it.
Have you been successful in communicating with our DC faculty? If not, what steps have you followed to contact them?
So I usually do not reach out directly to dual credit faculty. I usually reach out to your points of contact, and then the point of contact or the district-wide coordinator will then create a communication plan to push that information out. And so it kind of differs by discipline. You may actually hear from a faculty member that has been selected to kind of adopt various schools and make sure that they reach out and mentor faculty there. So you may hear from a particular member of the discipline, maybe even the discipline coordinator. I have not reached out myself because I don't want to overstep the discipline and kind of like break that relationship that you're building with them.
All right, thank you. I
Sure.
don't see any other questions, but if anybody else has a question, you can feel free to unmute and ask.
Sounds good. Well, again, thank you for spending your evening with me. I really, really appreciate it. And if you need me, I will drop my contact information in the chat so that it can live there, I'm sure, on the internet in perpetuity. I will also give you my cell phone if you need to get a hold of me and I'm not in my office. You can feel free to call my cell. If you text me there, I'll get it, but I need you to lead with hi. I'm from EPCC. My name is Professor so-and-so, whatever your preferred is, and I will answer you.
And this is just a reminder, everybody, make sure that you have signed in if you haven't already. You will have an opportunity to win some door prizes on Saturday. And our conference on Saturday morning begins at 8:45 a.m. With the keynote address at 11 a.m. Thank you, Rebekah, for this amazing workshop presentation. Thank you again for participating. And for everybody, we hope to see you on Saturday.